My daughter-in-law forgot her cell phone in my house. It rang, and on the screen appeared a photo of my husband, who had died 5 years ago. When I opened the message, my heart almost stopped. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The morning sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of my farmhouse kitchen, casting delicate patterns across the worn oak table where I'd shared breakfast with Harold for 47 years. 5 years had passed since his funeral, yet I still set out 2 coffee mugs each morning before remembering. Old habits, they say, die hard. At 70, I'd learned that grief doesn't fade. It simply becomes furniture in the rooms of your heart. I was washing those 2 mugs, hands submerged in warm soapy water, when I heard the buzz. At first, I thought it was a trapped bee. We got them sometimes in late September here in rural Vermont, confused insects seeking warmth before winter arrived. But the sound came again, persistent, mechanical. A phone, vibrating against the wooden sideboard near the front door. "Hello?" I called out, drying my hands on my apron. "Did someone forget something?" Silence answered. My daughter-in-law Rachel had left just 20 minutes earlier, after our usual Tuesday morning visit. She came every week like clockwork, ostensibly to check on me, though I suspected it was more about maintaining appearances than genuine concern. Rachel had always been polished, perfect, the kind of woman who color-coordinated her grocery lists and never had a hair out of place. The phone buzzed again. I walked to the sideboard, my knees protesting slightly. The device lay face up, its screen illuminated. My breath caught in my throat. Harold's face smiled up at me from the screen. Not a photo I recognized from our albums. This was different. Harold wearing a purple shirt I'd never seen, standing somewhere I didn't recognize, his smile broader than I'd seen it in years before his death. The image was attached to an incoming text message. My hand trembled as I reached for the phone. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that even as my fingers closed around the device. Privacy, boundaries. These were things I'd always respected. But that was my husband's face. My dead husband, looking younger, happier, more alive than he'd seemed during those final struggling years. The message preview showed beneath his photo. "Tuesday again? Same time? I'm counting down the minutes until I can hold you." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the sideboard, my other hand still clutching Rachel's phone. The words swam before my eyes, refusing to make sense. "Tuesday. Same time. Counting down the minutes." This message wasn't old. The timestamp read 9:47 a.m., just moments ago. Someone was texting Rachel. Someone using Harold's photo. Someone who met with her on Tuesdays. My mind raced through possibilities, each more troubling than the last. A prank? Some cruel joke? But who would do such a thing? And why use Harold's image? I should put the phone down. I should call Rachel, tell her she'd forgotten it, let her come back for it. Instead, I unlocked the screen. Rachel had never been cautious about security. I'd watched her enter her passcode dozens of times. Her son's birthday, my grandson Ethan's special day. 4 digits, 0815. August 15th. The phone opened without resistance. I navigated to the messages with shaking fingers. The contact was saved simply as T. Just a letter, nothing more. But the message thread went back months, years perhaps. I scrolled upward, watching dates flash past. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Wear that purple dress I love. Thank you for last night. You make me feel alive again. Your husband suspects nothing. We're safe. Your husband. My son, Michael. Rachel's husband of 15 years, father of my grandson, the boy who'd helped Harold rebuild the barn when he was just 19 years old." I sank into the chair by the door, Harold's wedding gift to me, a hand-carved oak piece he'd spent 3 months perfecting. The phone felt hot in my hands, burning with secrets I'd never wanted to know. The earlier messages were different. Careful. Planning. Same place as always. The farm is perfect. She never suspects. Make sure the old woman doesn't see us. She's sharper than she looks. The old woman. Me. They'd been meeting here. In my home. Right under my nose. I scrolled further, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then I found it. A message that made the world stop. I still have some of his clothes at the cabin. Should I get rid of them? Or do you want to keep them as souvenirs? His clothes. Harold's clothes. The reply from Rachel, dated 3 months after Harold's funeral. Keep them. I like sleeping in his shirts. They smell like him. Like us. Like those afternoons when Meggie thought he was at his brother's place. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering against the floor. No, this couldn't be real. Harold and Rachel? My husband and my daughter-in-law? It was impossible. Obscene. A violation of everything I'd believed about my life, my marriage, my family. But the evidence glowed on that screen. Undeniable. How long? When had it started? Those Tuesday afternoons when Harold claimed to visit his brother George in Burlington. Had he been with Rachel instead? And George had died 2 years ago, taking any possibility of verification with him to the grave. I picked up the phone with trembling hands, forcing myself to read more. There were photos, dozens of them, carefully hidden in a separate folder I discovered by accident while searching. Harold and Rachel together. Harold's arm around her waist, Rachel kissing his cheek, my farmhouse visible in the background of several shots, my porch, my garden, my bedroom window. They'd been here, together, in my home. One photo showed them in my barn, Rachel wearing one of Harold's old flannel shirts, laughing at something beyond the camera's view. The date stamp read, July 2019, 5 months before Harold's heart attack. 5 months before I'd sat beside his hospital bed, holding his hand, whispering that I loved him, that everything would be all right. Had he thought of her in those final moments? Had his last thoughts been of Rachel instead of me? A new message appeared, making me jump. Did you forget your phone? Michael just called my cell asking if I'd seen you. I told him you were probably grocery shopping. Get your phone and call him back before he gets suspicious. T again. The mysterious sender using Harold's photo. But Harold was dead. So who was T? My mind worked through the puzzle, even as my heart cracked into smaller and smaller pieces. Someone was continuing Harold's affair with Rachel. Someone who knew about their relationship. Someone who had access to Harold's photos, his clothes, his secrets. I heard a car in the driveway. Rachel's silver SUV, returning for her forgotten phone. I had perhaps 30 seconds to decide what to do. Confront her now, with nothing but shock and heartbreak as my weapons, or stay silent, learn more, understand the full scope of this betrayal before showing my hand? The doorbell rang. I looked at the phone in my hands, then at the door, then back at the phone. On the screen, another message appeared. I love you. See you tonight. Same cabin. I'll bring wine. Tonight. The cabin. More lies, more betrayal, more secrets. I made my decision. Coming, I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. I slipped Rachel's phone into my apron pocket, grabbed a dish towel, and opened the door with a smile I didn't feel. Rachel, dear, did you forget something? She stood on my porch, perfectly composed as always, but I saw something new in her eyes now. Something I'd missed before. Calculation. Wariness. The look of someone with secrets to protect. My phone, she said, smiling. I'm so scattered today. Is it here? I haven't seen it. I lied smoothly, surprising myself. But come in. Help me look. As she stepped past me into the house, her perfume trailing behind her, the same perfume I'd smelled on Harold's shirts during those last years, I felt something shift inside me. The grief-stricken widow was gone. In her place stood someone harder, sharper, more dangerous. Someone who would uncover every secret, no matter where it led. Someone who would make them all pay. Let's check the kitchen, I said pleasantly, closing the door behind us. I'm sure it will turn up. But the phone stayed hidden in my apron pocket, warm against my hip, holding secrets that would tear my family apart. And I intended to discover every single one of them. Rachel searched my kitchen with the thoroughness of someone looking for more than just a phone. She opened drawers, peered behind the toaster, even checked inside the bread box. I watched her, my hand resting casually in my apron pocket, fingers curled around her phone. That's so strange, she said, straightening up with a worried expression. I could have sworn I left it on the sideboard. Maybe you took it with you and it's in your car, I suggested, keeping my voice light and helpful. The concerned mother-in-law, nothing more. Maybe. But she didn't look convinced. Her eyes darted around the kitchen once more, and I saw her gaze linger on my apron pocket for just a fraction of a second too long. She knows, I thought. Or suspects. Well, I should get going, Rachel said finally, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Michael wants me home before lunch. If you find it, I'll call you right away, I promised. After she left, I stood at the window and watched her SUV disappear down the gravel drive. Only then did I pull out the phone and sink into Harold's chair, my hands shaking as I continued reading. The message thread went back 4 years. 4 years of lies, of secret meetings, of my husband and my daughter-in-law betraying my son and me. The early messages were cautious, almost businesslike. Then they changed, became intimate, passionate. Harold had written things to Rachel I'd forgotten he was capable of feeling. You make me remember what it's like to be wanted. Meggie looks at me like I'm already dead. That one hurt worse than the others. Had I done that? Had I stopped seeing him? Really seeing him? Somewhere along the way? But that didn't excuse this. Nothing could excuse this. I found references to the cabin, a place Harold supposedly inherited from his uncle but sold years ago. Or so he'd told me. More searching revealed GPS coordinates embedded in one photo. Harold and Rachel weren't tech-savvy enough to know about metadata, apparently. I copied the coordinates into my own phone. Lake Champlain area, about 40 minutes north. Close enough for afternoon trysts. Far enough that they'd never run into anyone we knew. But I still didn't know who T was. The mysterious person who'd inherited Harold's role in this sick arrangement. My own phone rang, making me jump. Michael's name flashed on the screen. Hi, sweetheart, I answered, forcing normalcy into my voice. Mom, have you seen Rachel? She's not answering her phone. Because her phone is in my pocket, I thought. She was here this morning, but she left hours ago. Maybe her battery died? Maybe. He sounded stressed. Look, I need to talk to you about something. Can I come by tonight? My heart rate spiked. Of course. Is everything all right? A long pause. We'll talk later. Love you, Mom? He hung up before I could respond. I stared at Rachel's phone, then at my own. Michael wanted to talk. About what? Did he know something? Suspect something? I needed information, and I needed it fast. But investigating my own family required delicacy. One wrong move, and they'd close ranks, hide evidence, gaslight me into thinking I was a paranoid old woman losing her grip on reality. I'd seen it happen to Sandra Matthews down the road. Her daughter-in-law had been stealing from her for years, and when Sandra finally spoke up, the family had her declared incompetent and put in a care facility. She died there 6 months later, still insisting she'd been robbed. No, I had to be smarter than that. I spent the afternoon creating a plan. First, I needed to secure evidence. I connected Rachel's phone to my laptop, a skill my grandson Ethan had taught me during the pandemic lockdowns, and backed up everything. Photos, messages, all of it. I saved copies to a thumb drive and hid it inside a hollowed-out book on my shelf, one of Harold's old law textbooks that nobody would ever think to open. Then I tackled the question of T. I read through the messages again, looking for clues. T was male. That much was clear from the language. He knew about Harold and Rachel's affair, knew intimate details. The messages started just 2 months after Harold's funeral, as if someone had been waiting for him to die. I can give you everything he couldn't. I'm younger, stronger, and I won't die on you. The cruelty of that message made my stomach turn. But it also told me something. T had known Harold was sick, known about his heart condition. I made a list of possibilities. Harold's friends? His business associates? Someone from the farm co-op? Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A message from 3 years ago, from Harold to Rachel. Tom keeps asking questions about where I go on Tuesdays. I think he's following me. We need to be more careful. Tom. T. Tom was George's son, Harold's nephew, and therefore my nephew by marriage. I sat back, the implications washing over me. Tom was 38, married with 2 kids. He lived in Burlington and visited occasionally. Always pleasant, always helpful. After George died, Tom had been the one to handle the estate, to sort through his father's papers. Had he found evidence of Harold's affair then? Or had he known all along? The front door opened without a knock. Only Michael had a key, and only he would let himself in like that. I barely had time to hide Rachel's phone under a sofa cushion before my son appeared in the doorway. He looked terrible. Pale, unshaven, his shirt wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. "Michael, what's wrong?" He collapsed into a chair across from me, his head in his hands. "Mom, I think Rachel's having an affair." The irony was almost too much to bear. I kept my face carefully neutral. "What makes you think that?" "She's been distant for months. Years, maybe. She disappears on Tuesdays, says she's at yoga or the grocery store, but I checked our credit card statements. No charges at the gym, no grocery store receipts on Tuesdays." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "I feel like I'm going crazy. Am I being paranoid?" "No," I said quietly. "You're not paranoid." He stared at me. "You know something." "I found her phone," I admitted, pulling it from under the cushion. "She left it here this morning." I shouldn't have looked, but I did. I watched emotions play across his face. Hope that I was wrong, fear that I was right, dread at what he was about to learn. I wanted to protect him, my boy, my only child, but he deserved the truth. "It's bad, isn't it?" he whispered. I handed him the phone. The passcode is Ethan's birthday. While he read, I went to the kitchen and made tea neither of us would drink. I heard him gasp, heard him curse, heard something that might have been a sob. When I returned, he was white-faced and shaking. "Dad?" he said hoarsely. "She was sleeping with Dad, my father and my wife. How long?" He couldn't finish the sentence. 4 years from what I can tell. Maybe longer. "And after he died? Who's T?" "I think it's Tom. Your cousin Tom." Michael's face twisted with rage. "That son of a... I'll kill him. I'll kill both of them." "No." My voice was sharp, commanding. "You won't do anything rash. We need to think this through." "Think it through?" "Mom, they destroyed our family. Dad betrayed you, betrayed me. Rachel's been lying to my face for years. And Tom..." He stood up, pacing. "What are we supposed to think through? I want a divorce. I want them exposed. I want everyone to know what they did." "And then what?" I asked calmly. "Rachel gets half of everything in the divorce. She might even get custody of Ethan if she paints you as unstable. Tom denies everything. There's no proof linking him directly to T, just a guess. You lose your son, your money, and your dignity, while they move on with their lives." He stopped pacing. "So, what do you suggest?" "We investigate further. We gather evidence that can't be disputed. We figure out what they want and why they're doing this." I leaned forward. "And then we destroy them carefully, methodically, in a way they never see coming." Michael looked at his mother, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. "I didn't know you could be this cold." "Neither did I admitted. "But they hurt my son. They hurt me. And I won't let them get away with it." A knock at the door interrupted us. We both froze. "Mrs. Sullivan?" An unfamiliar voice. "I'm Detective Morrison with the Vermont State Police. I need to speak with you about your husband's death." Michael and I exchanged glances. "The police? Now?" "Just a moment," I called out, my mind racing. I grabbed Rachel's phone and shoved it into Michael's hands. "Hide this. Don't let anyone see it." He nodded and disappeared into the back hallway. I smoothed my apron, checked my reflection in the hall mirror, and opened the door with a polite smile. A woman in her 40s stood on my porch, badge in hand, her expression professionally neutral. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Sullivan. I'm reopening the investigation into your husband's death. There have been some new allegations that require looking into." "Allegations?" My voice stayed steady through sheer force of will. "My husband died of a heart attack 5 years ago." "Yes, ma'am. But we've received information suggesting his death might not have been from natural causes." She pulled out a notebook. "Can you tell me who had access to your husband's medication in the weeks before he died?" The world tilted again. Murder. She was suggesting Harold had been murdered. And suddenly, the affair, the betrayal, the secret messages. All of it took on a darker, more sinister dimension. "I think," I said carefully, "that I should call my lawyer." Detective Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's certainly your right, Mrs. Sullivan. But I should tell you, the person who filed the complaint specifically named you as a suspect." Detective Morrison sat in my living room, her notebook open, her eyes cataloging every detail of my home. Michael had returned from hiding Rachel's phone, his face carefully composed, playing the concerned son perfectly. I'd raised him well, perhaps too well, given what we'd just discovered about the deceptions in our family. "Mrs. Sullivan, I need to ask you some questions about the days leading up to your husband's death," Morrison said. "Specifically about his medications." "Harold had 3 prescriptions," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Blood pressure medication, a statin for cholesterol, and baby aspirin. All prescribed by Dr. Pemberton. Is there a problem?" "Dr. Pemberton retired 2 years ago. We haven't been able to locate his records yet." She flipped through her notebook. "Can you tell me who had access to those medications?" "Just me and Harold. They were in our bathroom cabinet." "And you administered them?" "No. Harold took his own pills. He was perfectly capable." I stopped, remembering. "Wait, that's not entirely true. The last few months, Rachel would sometimes help him. She's a nurse. Was a nurse before she married Michael." Morrison's pen moved across the page. "Your daughter-in-law had access to his medications. She visited regularly. She wanted to help." Even as I said it, I felt the pieces shifting, rearranging themselves into a darker picture. "Mom," Michael interjected, his voice tight. "Are you saying Rachel might have—" "I'm not saying anything," Morrison interrupted. "I'm just gathering information." She turned to Michael. "When did your wife start helping with your father's medications?" "I don't know. 6 months before he died? Maybe longer?" Michael looked at me, and I saw the realization dawning in his eyes. She said she wanted to make sure he was taking them correctly, that Mom sometimes forgot to remind him. I'd never forgotten. Not once. But Rachel had convinced Harold I was becoming forgetful, that I needed her help. I'd been grateful at the time, relieved to have assistance as Harold's health declined. Now I wondered what else she'd convinced him of. "Detective, who filed this complaint?" I asked directly. "Who accused me of murdering my husband?" Morrison hesitated, then closed her notebook. "The complaint was filed anonymously, but it included very specific information. Details about medication changes, about arguments between you and your husband, about financial motives." "What financial motives?" Michael demanded. "My parents were comfortable, but they weren't wealthy. According to the complaint, your father had a life insurance policy worth $500,000, with your mother as the sole beneficiary." The room went silent. I felt Michael's eyes on me. "I didn't know about any life insurance policy," I said slowly. "Harold handled our finances. After he died, I found the usual accounts, the farm assets, his pension, but no life insurance policy." "You didn't receive a payout?" "No, nothing." Morrison's expression shifted slightly, surprise or maybe suspicion. "That's interesting. According to the complaint, the policy was purchased 3 months before your husband's death, and the premium was paid from your joint account. 3 months before Harold died. Right when the messages between him and Rachel had become more desperate, more passionate. Right when he'd written, "I can't keep living this lie. I want to see our bank statements," I said. "From that period. Can you get them?" "We're in the process of subpoenaing financial records," Morrison confirmed. "But if you have access to your accounts?" "She does," Michael said. He pulled out his phone. "Mom, you still have the same bank, right? I can help you access the online statements." We worked together while Morrison watched, pulling up records from 5 years ago. There it was, a payment of $1,200 to Granite State Insurance, dated 3 months before Harold's death. The payment had been categorized as medical expenses in our bookkeeping software, something that wouldn't have seemed unusual during that time when Harold was seeing specialists regularly. "I never authorized this," I said, my voice shaking now. "I never even saw this charge." "Who had access to your accounts besides you and your husband?" Morrison asked. "Rachel," Michael said quietly. "After Dad's heart attack, she offered to help manage their bills. Mom was overwhelmed. and Rachel said it would be one less thing to worry about. The detective's pen moved faster now. So your wife had access to your parents' financial accounts, to your father's medications, and according to the complaint, she was present the day your father died. We all were, Michael protested. It was a family dinner. Dad collapsed at the table. The paramedics said it was a massive heart attack. There was nothing suspicious about it. But there was. I remembered that dinner now with new clarity. Rachel had prepared Harold's favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables. She'd been so attentive, making sure he ate, refilling his water glass, insisting he take his evening medications early because dinner was running late. And I remembered something else. Something I'd dismissed at the time as grief-induced confusion. His pills, I said slowly. That night, Harold said his pills looked different. Smaller, he said. Rachel told him the pharmacy had changed suppliers, that it was the same medication, just a different manufacturer. Morrison leaned forward. Did you verify that? No. I trusted her. She was a nurse. Why would I question her? Mom. Michael's voice cracked. Are you saying Rachel killed Dad? I'm saying we need to find out what was in those pills, I replied, looking at Morrison. Is it too late for an autopsy? After 5 years? Toxicology would be difficult, but not impossible if we exhume the body. Morrison stood. Mrs. Sullivan, I need you to understand something. Right now, you're still a person of interest in this investigation. The complaint specifically names you, includes details that suggest insider knowledge. If you're being framed, we need to figure out by whom and why. After she left, Michael and I sat in stunned silence. Outside, the autumn afternoon was fading into evening, shadows lengthening across the farmhouse floor. We need to talk to Rachel, Michael finally said. Confront her with all of this. No. I stood, my mind working through possibilities. If Rachel filed that complaint, if she's setting me up for murder, then confronting her will just make her more careful. She'll destroy evidence, create alibis, maybe even disappear. Then what do? We follow her. Tonight. The message said she was meeting T at the cabin. We need to know what they're planning. Michael looked uncertain. Mom, if they're dangerous, then we stay hidden and we document everything. We record their conversation, take photos, gather evidence that proves what they've done. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door. Your father's death might not have been natural. That life insurance money went somewhere. And someone is trying to frame me for murder. I need to know why. We took Michael's truck, leaving my car at the farmhouse in case Rachel drove by and checked if I was home. The coordinates led us north along Route 7, then onto smaller country roads that wound through darkening forests. My phone's GPS guided us to a turnoff marked only by a rusted mailbox with no numbers. The cabin sat a quarter-mile down a rutted dirt road, invisible from the main route. A small, well-maintained structure with a green metal roof and a front porch overlooking the lake. Lights glowed in the windows. That's Rachel's SUV, Michael whispered, pointing to the silver vehicle parked beside a newer pickup truck. And that's Tom's truck. We parked further back, hidden by trees, and approached on foot. The October air was cold, our breath visible in the twilight. Through the cabin's front window, I could see Rachel and Tom sitting at a small table, wine glasses in hand, looking relaxed and intimate. Michael had his phone out, recording video through the window. I stood beside him, my heart pounding, watching my nephew and daughter-in-law toast each other. Can't believe the old bat actually fell for it, Tom was saying, his voice carrying through the thin cabin walls. The detective bought the whole story. Anonymous complaint, specific details, financial motive. They'll have her arrested within a week. Rachel laughed, a sound without warmth. She's too trusting, always has been. Even Harold said she was naive. That's why it was so easy to... She stopped abruptly. Tom had raised his hand, looking toward the window. Had he seen us? We ducked down, pressing against the cabin's wooden siding. My knees screamed in protest, but I didn't dare move. Michael's hand gripped my arm, both of us frozen, barely breathing. Thought I saw something, Tom said. Probably just a deer. You're paranoid, Rachel replied. No one knows about this place. Even if Michael suspected something, he'd never find it. He's too busy being the dutiful son. just like his father was the dutiful husband. Until he wasn't, Tom said, and they both laughed. The sound made my blood run cold. They weren't just having an affair. They'd planned this. They'd planned all of it. How much longer until the insurance pays out? Tom asked. The policy had a 2-year contestability period. It ended long ago. Once they arrest Maggie, the insurer will have no basis to deny the claim. Rachel swirled her wine. Once they arrest Maggie for Harold's murder, I'll express shock and grief. The wrong daughter-in-law, devastated that her beloved mother-in-law could do such a thing. The insurance company will have to pay the claim to Harold's estate. And I'm the executor of the estate, since his will was never updated, Tom finished. We split it 50-50, just like we planned. Minus Michael's portion, unfortunately, but we can work around that. Once Maggie's in prison and the scandal dies down, I'll file for divorce, claim emotional distress. I'll get half of everything Michael has, plus the insurance money. Michael's grip on my arm tightened painfully. Through the window, I watched Tom stand and move behind Rachel's chair, his hands on her shoulders. "You're brilliant," he said, using Harold's paranoia about Maggie forgetting things, getting her to step back from managing his medications. That was genius. He was so easy to manipulate, especially after I told him Maggie was complaining about him to her friends, saying she wished he'd hurry up and die. Rachel tilted her head back to look at Tom. He actually believed his own wife hated him. It made everything so much easier. I'd never said those things, never even thought them. But Harold had pulled away from me in those final months, had seemed angry and distant. I'd attributed it to his illness, to pain and fear of death. Now I understood it had been Rachel, poisoning him against me, isolating him, making him vulnerable. "And the pills?" Tom asked. "Digoxin, easy to get when you know the right people. Mixed it with his regular medication for 2 weeks before the dinner. Built up in his system gradually. Then that night, a final dose in his food, enough to trigger cardiac arrest. The autopsy showed heart attack, exactly as expected for someone with his condition. No one even looked for poison. Until now," Tom said. "If that detective gets smart and orders an exhumation, she won't. She has her suspect, her motive, her timeline. Maggie Sullivan, the neglected wife who discovered her husband's affair and decided to cash in on his insurance policy." Rachel stood, moving into Tom's arms. "In 5 months, we'll be rich. In 6 months, we'll be together. And Maggie will rot in prison for a murder we committed." They kissed, and Michael turned away, his face twisted in anguish and rage. He'd heard enough. We both had. We crept back to the truck in silence. Once inside, Michael started the engine with shaking hands. "They killed him," he whispered. "Rachel murdered my father, and Tom helped her, and they're framing you." "They made a mistake," I said quietly, my voice hard as stone. "They told us everything. We have it recorded. We have evidence. We take this to the police," Michael said, pulling onto the road. "We show them the recording, show them Rachel's phone, tell them everything." "No," I interrupted. "Not yet." He stared at me. "Mom, they murdered Dad. They're trying to send you to prison. We have to—" "Michael, think. That recording was made without their knowledge or consent. Vermont requires 2-party consent for recordings. A lawyer could get it thrown out. And the phone, I shouldn't have kept it. That could be considered theft, invasion of privacy. So what do? I looked out at the dark road ahead, at the shadows pressing in from the forest, and felt something cold and determined settle in my chest. "We make them confess," I said. "Properly, legally, in a way that can't be dismissed or explained away." I turned to Michael. "And we do it in front of witnesses who can't be intimidated or bought." "How?" "Your father's estate," I said slowly, the plan forming as I spoke. "It was never properly settled because of the missing life insurance policy. We need to have a formal reading of the will, bring everyone together. You, Rachel, Tom, the lawyer, maybe even Detective Morrison. And then what? Then we spring the trap," I said. "But first, we need to find that insurance money. Because wherever it went, that's where we'll find the final piece of evidence we need to destroy them." Michael drove faster, the truck's headlights cutting through the darkness. Behind us, the cabin's lights grew smaller, but I knew we'd be returning soon. The war had just begun, and I intended to win it. We spent that night in Michael's home office, surrounded by 5 years of financial records I'd brought from the farmhouse. Bank statements, credit card bills, insurance documents. Everything Harold had left behind. Rachel was at her sister's house, or so she'd texted Michael. More likely, she was at the cabin with Tom, celebrating their imminent victory. "There," Michael said, pointing at his laptop screen at 3 a.m. "Mom, look at this." The life insurance policy application, buried in a folder of scanned documents. Harold's signature at the bottom, but something about it looked wrong. The loops were too perfect, too careful. Harold's handwriting had been messy, hurried, the scrawl of a man who'd spent 40 years filling out farm equipment orders. "That's not his signature," I said with certainty. "Rachel forged it." "Can we prove that?" "Maybe. If we can find samples of Harold's real signature and have a handwriting expert compare them." I rubbed my tired eyes. "But that takes time, and we don't have much. Once that detective finishes her investigation, she'll arrest me. Then everything becomes harder. Finding evidence from jail, legal battles, years of appeals." Michael leaned back in his chair, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You've changed, Mom. You're different than you were even yesterday." "I'm fighting for my life," I replied simply, "and for justice for your father. Whatever else Harold did, he didn't deserve to die like that. Poisoned slowly, manipulated, betrayed. Do you forgive him? For the affair?" The question caught me off guard. Did I? Harold had been weak, vain, susceptible to a younger woman's attention, but Rachel had been calculating, predatory. She'd targeted him deliberately, I realized now. Gotten close to our family through Michael, then seduced a lonely, aging man who felt invisible to his wife. "I don't know," I admitted, "but that's a question for later. Right now, we focus on survival." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Drop the investigation or your grandson pays the price." Ice flooded my veins. "Michael, where's Ethan?" "At my mother-in-law's. Rachel took him there yesterday afternoon." "Why?" He saw my face, saw the phone. "What is it?" I showed him the message. He went white, immediately calling his mother-in-law. The conversation was brief, frantic. "He's fine," Michael said, relief evident. "Still asleep." I told her not to let him out of her sight, not to let Rachel pick him up without calling me first. Another text. "We know what you found at the cabin. Destroy the recording and forget everything, or the boy has an accident. You have until tomorrow night." They'd seen us. Or guessed. Either way, we'd underestimated how far they'd go. "That's it," Michael said, his voice shaking with rage. "I'm calling the police. We tell them everything. And they take Ethan while the police investigate." I interrupted. "Michael, think. They're desperate now, cornered. That makes them dangerous. If we move too fast, if we spook them, then what's your plan? Because right now, my son is being threatened by a murderer who happens to be his mother." The words hung in the air between us. Rachel was Ethan's mother. Whatever else she'd done, whatever monster she'd become, she'd given birth to my grandson, raised him for 12 years. The courts would consider that. So would Ethan. "We need leverage," I said slowly. "Something so damning they can't threaten us, can't run, can't do anything but confess." "Like what?" "Like the insurance money. Tom said he's the executor of Harold's estate, that the money would go through him. But the policy lists me as beneficiary." "So where did the money actually go?" Michael pulled up the insurance company's website, logging into the account using information from the scanned application. It took 3 tries to guess the password. Rachel had used Ethan's name and birthday, of course. The policy was active. Premium paid through automatic withdrawal from our joint account, a withdrawal I'd never noticed among the dozens of medical bills during Harold's final year. But the beneficiary had been changed 2 months after Harold's death. Not to me. To a trust, the Harold Sullivan Memorial Trust, managed by Thomas Sullivan as trustee. "That bastard," Michael breathed. "He set up a trust in Dad's name. Probably told the insurance company he was handling the estate. Can we access the trust documents?" "Not without a court order, but..." Michael's fingers flew across the keyboard. Mom, Tom filed the trust paperwork with the county clerk. Public record. I can pull it up. The document appeared on screen. The trust was established for the benefit of Harold Sullivan's heirs, with Thomas Sullivan as sole trustee, with full discretion over all distributions. In plain English, Tom controlled the money and could do whatever he wanted with it. This is fraud, I said. The insurance company thinks the money went to Harold's estate, but Tom diverted it to a trust he controls. A trust that probably has no assets except that insurance money, Michael added. He kept scrolling. Look at the distribution schedule. Tom's authorized to take reasonable trustee fees, up to 40% of the trust assets. Rachel is listed as a special consultant entitled to 40%. That leaves 20% for Harold's actual heirs. You and me, I said quietly. They were going to give us just enough to avoid suspicion, keep the rest for themselves. Michael's jaw clenched. I'm calling Tom right now. No. Let them think we're scared. Let them think the threat worked. An idea was forming. Dangerous but necessary. What if we could get them to move the money? Force them to do something that proves their guilt? How? By making them panic. By threatening what they care about most. Each other. I spent the next hour drafting a careful message. Not from my phone or Michael's. We drove to an all-night diner and used their public Wi-Fi to create an anonymous email account. Then I sent the message to Tom's personal email. I know about the digoxin. I know about the cabin. I know about the insurance fraud. You have 24 hours to transfer $250,000 to the account below, or I go to the police with evidence that Rachel murdered Harold. She goes to prison. You go free. Your choice. A friend. I included a cryptocurrency wallet number that Michael had set up, untraceable and anonymous. You're blackmailing him? Michael asked, incredulous. I'm making him choose between money and Rachel. If he pays, we have proof he knows about the murder. If he doesn't pay but panics, he'll contact Rachel, maybe do something stupid. Either way, they make a mistake. And if he calls the police? He won't. Because going to the police means admitting he knows about a murder, that he's been covering it up, that he committed insurance fraud. I looked at my son. We're forcing them out into the open. The response came 90 minutes later. Not to the anonymous email, but to my personal phone. Tom's voice on a call. Meggie, we need to talk. Just you and me. Tomorrow, noon, at the cabin. Come alone or Michael's son disappears. I met Michael's eyes across the diner table. The trap was working, but it was also tightening around us. I'll be there, I told Tom, keeping my voice steady. Good. And Meggie? Don't be stupid. You're an old woman. You can't win this. He hung up. Michael was already shaking his head. No, absolutely not. You're not going there alone. They've killed once. Which is why you're not coming, I interrupted. If something happens to me, you're Ethan's only protection. You need to stay with him, keep him safe. Mom, Michael, listen. I'm going to wire myself. I'll wear a recording device, the legal kind. Two-party consent, which I'll get by telling Tom I'm recording at the start of our conversation. Everything he says will be admissible in court. And if he kills you after you tell him you're recording? He won't, because I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. I pulled out a document I'd prepared earlier, a handwritten confession, signed and dated. I'm going to confess to Harold's murder. Tell Tom I did it, that I knew about the affair and poisoned Harold in a jealous rage. I'll say I'm willing to take the blame and go to prison quietly. Why would you do that? Because it gives Tom what he wants. Me in prison, out of the way. But in exchange, I want two things. The insurance money returned to Harold's estate, and Rachel out of your life. A quiet divorce. No custody fight over Ethan. Michael stared at me. That's insane. You'd confess to murder? A false confession isn't a crime. And once Tom agrees, once he admits on tape that there was a murder, that Rachel poisoned Harold, that they committed insurance fraud, then I have everything I need. I recant my confession, reveal the recording, and we have them. It's too risky. It's the only way. I gripped his hand. Trust me, I've been underestimated my whole life. By Harold, by Rachel, by Tom. They think I'm just a naive old woman. Let them keep thinking that until it's too late. The next morning, I visited Detective Morrison at the police station. I told her I'd received threats, showed her the messages about Ethan. She was immediately concerned, wanted to assign protection. "I think I know who sent them," I said carefully. "I'm meeting them today at noon to talk it out. I wanted you to know, in case something happens to me. Mrs. Sullivan, if you're in danger, I'll be recording the conversation. Two-party consent, fully legal. If I'm right about who's threatening me, the recording will prove it." Morrison looked skeptical but nodded. "Where's this meeting?" I gave her the address of the cabin, watched her write it down. "If I don't call you by 1 o'clock, something's wrong," I said. "The recording device will have GPS tracking. You'll be able to find me." It wasn't quite true. The recording device Michael had purchased at an electronics store that morning didn't have GPS. But Morrison didn't need to know that. I just needed her to come looking if things went wrong. At 11:30, Michael drove me to a location half a mile from the cabin. He helped me test the recording device, a small unit clipped to my bra, the microphone hidden in my collar. "Promise me you'll be careful," he said, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "I promise." I kissed his cheek. "Keep Ethan safe. If this goes wrong, if I don't come back, the thumb drive in Harold's Law textbook has everything. Give it to the police. Tell them the whole story. Mom, I love you, Michael. You've been a wonderful son. I'm proud of you." I squeezed his hand. "Now let me go finish this." I walked the last half mile through the woods, my knees protesting every step. The October sun was bright but cold, the leaves crunching under my feet. Ahead, I could see the cabin, Tom's truck parked outside. As I approached, the door opened. Tom stood there smiling, confident. Behind him, I could see Rachel sitting at the table, her expression unreadable. "Maggie," Tom said warmly, as if I'd come for a social visit. "Come in. We have a lot to discuss." I climbed the porch steps, my heart hammering, my hand instinctively touching the recording device hidden under my jacket. "Before we start," I said clearly, "I want you to know I'm recording this conversation. For my own protection." Tom's smile didn't falter. "Of course, we have nothing to hide." But as I stepped inside and saw the expression on Rachel's face, cold, calculating, triumphant, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. On the table in front of her sat a gun. "Actually, Maggie," Rachel said softly, "you're not recording anything. That device you're wearing? It's been jammed. We've been listening to your phone calls, reading your emails. We know everything you've planned." Tom closed the door behind me. The lock clicked with a sound like doom. "Sit down," Rachel ordered. "We have a new proposition for you, and this time, you don't get to negotiate." I stood in the center of the cabin, my hands steady despite the gun on the table. 70 years of life had taught me that panic was the enemy of survival. Rachel and Tom expected fear. Instead, I gave them curiosity. "How long have you been listening?" I asked, my voice calm. Tom laughed, clearly pleased with himself. "Since yesterday morning. After you left the cabin, I put a tracker on Michael's truck. Cloned your phone remotely. It's surprisingly easy when you know the right people. We heard every conversation, read every email, watched you plan your little trap. Then you know I told Detective Morrison where I'd be," I said. "She's expecting my call in an hour." "Actually, she's not," Rachel interjected smoothly. "I called her this morning from your phone. Canceled the meeting. Said you were feeling ill." She was very understanding. Rachel stood, walking around the table but keeping distance between us. "You didn't think this through, Maggie. You're smart, I'll give you that. Smarter than Harold ever was. But you're old, you're alone, and you're outmatched. Sit down," Tom ordered, gesturing to a chair. I sat, noting the layout of the cabin as I did. One door, 2 windows, both visible from where Tom and Rachel stood. They'd positioned themselves strategically, Tom blocking the exit, Rachel with easy access to the gun. They'd done this before, or at least planned it carefully. "Here's what's going to happen," Rachel said, her nurse's voice taking on that patient, explanatory tone she probably used with dying patients. "You're going to write a confession. A real one. You killed Harold because you discovered his affair. You poisoned him with digoxin you obtained through—" She paused, thinking, "through your sister's prescription. She had a heart condition, didn't she? Died 3 years ago? My sister Margaret. They'd researched everything. You'll confess to the murder, Rachel continued. Then you'll write a suicide note. Grief-stricken, unable to live with the guilt, facing prison. You drove out here to Harold's cabin, the place where he'd been happy, where he'd found love. And you took your own life. With what? I asked. I don't have any pills with me. Tom pulled a bottle from his jacket. Sleeping pills. The same ones you take every night. We got them from your medicine cabinet yesterday. More than enough in here to do the job. They'd been in my house. Violated my home again, just as they'd violated my marriage, my trust, my family. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then we shoot you and make it look like suicide anyway, Tom said flatly. But that's messier, raises more questions. This way is cleaner. You confess, you die, the investigation closes. Michael inherits everything. Rachel gets half in the divorce, and life goes on. Except Michael knows the truth, I pointed out. He heard your confession at this very cabin. He has Rachel's phone, the message history, all the evidence. Had, Rachel corrected. Past tense. I remotely wiped my old phone this morning. Every message, every photo, all gone. And that recording you made? Inadmissible in court, just like you told Michael. You did us a favor, actually, explaining all the legal problems with secret recordings. She was right. I'd been so focused on gathering evidence legally that I'd telegraphed every move. Michael will never stop investigating, I said. He knows you killed his father. Michael is emotional, impulsive, Rachel replied dismissively. He'll grieve for you. He'll suspect me for a while. But without proof, what can he do? Eventually, he'll move on. People always do. And Ethan needs his mother. The mention of my grandson sent a spike of fear through me, but I kept my expression neutral. You'd really do this? Murder your husband's mother? In front of each other? We've done worse, Tom said with a shrug. Harold was harder, actually. Took weeks of careful dosing, monitoring his symptoms. This is almost merciful by comparison. Besides, Rachel added, moving closer, you're not really Michael's mother anymore, are you? Not the woman he knew. That woman died when she discovered Harold's affair. The person sitting here now is bitter, vengeful, unrecognizable. Michael will mourn the mother he remembers, not the woman you've become. Her words were designed to wound, to make me doubt myself. But I'd learned something these past terrible days. Transformation wasn't weakness. The naive, trusting Meggie was gone. In her place sat someone harder, wiser, more dangerous than Rachel could imagine. I needed to stall, to think. Detective Morrison might not be coming, but Michael knew where I was. He'd wait for my call, and when it didn't come, "What are you thinking about?" Rachel asked sharply. "Michael. He's busy right now. We sent him a text from your phone saying you needed him to pick up Ethan immediately, that there was an emergency at school. He's probably halfway to Portland by now." She smiled. "Your grandson is perfectly safe, by the way. No emergency. Just Michael running around in a panic while we handle things here. They'd thought of everything. Or so they believed. You're wondering if there's a way out," Tom said, reading my expression. "There isn't. We've planned this for years, Meggie. Years. Even before Harold died, we knew you'd be a problem eventually. You're too observant, too persistent. Harold was supposed to change his will, leave everything to a trust we controlled, but the old fool kept putting it off. Said he wanted to wait until after Christmas, after Ethan's birthday, after the spring planting. So you killed him before he could," I said quietly. Understanding was dawning, pieces clicking into place. You killed him before he could change his mind about anything. We accelerated the timeline, Rachel admitted. Harold was getting sentimental, talking about making things right with you, about confessing everything. He was weak. We couldn't risk it. She picked up the gun, checked it casually, then set it back down. The message was clear. They were comfortable with violence, practiced even. "Write the confession," Tom ordered, pushing paper and pen across the table. "We don't have all day." I picked up the pen, but instead of writing, I looked directly at Rachel. "Did you ever love Michael? Even a little?" The question caught her off guard. What does that matter? I'm about to die. Humor a dying woman's curiosity. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then shrugged. Michael was a means to an end. Access to your family, to Harold, to this comfortable life. He was sweet, easy to manipulate. Still is. And Harold was pathetic, she said with contempt. A vain old man desperate to feel young again. He actually believed I loved him. Believed he was special. She laughed. The only person I've ever loved is Tom. We've been together since high school. Everything else has been pretense. Even Ethan? The question came out harder than I intended. Ethan was necessary, Rachel said coldly. A child to cement my place in the family. To give me leverage. He's useful. Hearing her talk about my grandson like a tool, like property, made something snap inside me. But I kept my voice level, my hands steady. One more question, I said. The anonymous complaint to the police. That was your backup plan? Insurance, Tom confirmed. If you got too close to the truth, we'd make you look guilty. Frame you for Harold's murder before you could figure out what really happened. The complaint has just enough detail to seem credible. Your access to his medications, your financial motive, your opportunity. Very thorough, I acknowledged. Then I looked at the paper in front of me. I assume you want this confession to be detailed? Believable? Extremely detailed, Rachel said. Names, dates, methods, enough that no one will question it. I began to write, my handwriting steady, but I wasn't writing a confession. I, Meggie Sullivan, I wrote clearly, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare the following as true testimony. Behind me, neither Rachel nor Tom could see the words. They were too far away, too confident I'd comply. On October 6, 2025, I came to the cabin on Lake Champlain owned by Thomas Sullivan. Present were Thomas Sullivan and Rachel Sullivan, who threatened me with death unless I confessed to murdering my husband Harold Sullivan. I kept writing, kept them talking. Tell me about the digoxin. Where did you get it? Through a friend in Canada, Rachel said, distracted by her own cleverness. Ordered it online, shipped to a P.O. box under a fake name. Untraceable. I wrote it all down, every word. And the insurance fraud? The trust? That was my idea, Tom said proudly. Set up the trust, had Harold's will drawn up naming me executor. He signed it thinking it was a property deed for the cabin, forged his signature on the insurance application. Simple, really, when you know what you're doing. Brilliant, I murmured, still writing. I was documenting everything. Their confession, their methods, their motives. Not a suicide note, but a testimony. And if they killed me, this paper would tell the truth, even if my voice couldn't. Are you almost done? Rachel asked impatiently. This is taking too long. Almost, I said. Then, as I wrote the final lines, I made my move. I'd noticed something they'd missed. A small detail that gave me one chance. The gun on the table was a revolver, and it was facing Rachel, not me. When she'd set it down after checking it, she'd placed it carelessly, handle toward the center of the table. Not close enough for me to grab, but close enough to knock away. One last thing, I said, looking up at Rachel. You should know. I recorded something that will destroy you. Something you didn't find, didn't wipe, didn't anticipate. You're bluffing, Rachel said, but uncertainty flickered across her face. Harold's lawyer, I continued calmly. Mr. Brennan. I sent him a sealed envelope 2 days ago with instructions to open it if anything happened to me. Inside is a full account of everything I discovered, including copies of your messages, financial records, and a detailed timeline of Harold's murder. It was a lie. I'd done no such thing, but Rachel didn't know that. You're lying, Tom said, but he looked at Rachel, doubt creeping in. Am I? I smiled coldly. You've been so busy tracking my phone, my emails, my obvious moves. Did you think to monitor my physical mail? My in-person meetings? I'm 70 years old. I know how to exist without leaving a digital trail. Rachel lunged for the gun. I lunged for the table. My hand hit the table's edge, flipping it upward with surprising force. Adrenaline, fear, and desperate strength combined. The gun flew off, clattering across the floor. Papers scattered. Rachel stumbled backward. Tom rushed forward, but I was already moving toward the door, faster than a 70-year-old woman should be able to move. My hand closed on the doorknob. It was locked. Of course it was locked. Tom grabbed my arm, yanking me backward. I spun, using his momentum against him, a move my father had taught me 60 years ago when I'd asked about self-defense. My elbow connected with his solar plexus, and he gasped, releasing me. Rachel had the gun now, raising it with shaking hands. "Don't move," she ordered, her voice high-pitched with panic. "Don't!" The window behind her exploded inward. Michael crashed through it in a shower of glass, his shoulder hitting Rachel's back. The gun fired, deafening in the small space, the bullet burying itself in the ceiling. Michael wrestled the weapon away from her, his face cut and bleeding from the glass, but his grip iron-strong. "Get outside, Mom!" he shouted. "Now!" Behind him, through the broken window, I saw more figures approaching. Detective Morrison, 2 uniformed officers, all running toward the cabin. Tom tried to bolt, but I stuck my foot out. A petty, vindictive gesture, but satisfying nonetheless. He crashed to the floor, and within seconds, officers were through the door, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Everything happened very fast after that. Rachel and Tom were handcuffed, read their rights, their protests and threats fading into legal jargon and official procedure. The confession I'd written was carefully bagged as evidence. Michael's phone showed the recording he'd made through the broken window. Every word Rachel and Tom had said, every admission of guilt. Detective Morrison looked at me with something between admiration and exasperation. "Mrs. Sullivan, you could have been killed." "But I wasn't," I said simply. My hands were shaking now, delayed reaction setting in, but I remained standing. "And now you have everything you need. The recording through the window is legally admissible," she confirmed. "Michael was on public property. The window was open enough to hear clearly, and you'd already told them you were recording. They had no expectation of privacy." I looked at my son, my brave, foolish, wonderful son who'd smashed through a window to save me. "I told you to stay with Ethan. I took him to the police station first," Michael said, grinning through the blood on his face. "Told Morrison everything, played her the cabin recording from last night. She agreed it might not hold up in court, but it was enough for probable cause. We've been outside for 20 minutes, listening, waiting for the right moment." "You heard everything?" "Every word." His expression hardened as he looked at Rachel being led to a police car, including what she said about Ethan. That, I knew, was the wound that would take longest to heal. Not the betrayal of the affair, not even the murder, but knowing that Ethan had been nothing more than a tool to his own mother. As they loaded Rachel into the police car, she looked at me through the window. No remorse, no fear, just cold calculation even now. "You won't win," she called out. "I'll get the best lawyers. The door slammed, cutting off her threats. Tom was quieter, defeated. As they put him in a separate car, he said only, "We would have gotten away with it." "No," I said, loud enough for him to hear. "You wouldn't have, because you made the same mistake everyone makes. You underestimated an old woman." Detective Morrison smiled grimly. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm going to need you to come to the station, give a full statement." "Of course. But first," I turned to Michael, "call your mother-in-law. Tell her to keep Ethan there tonight. He doesn't need to know about this yet. Let him have one more day of being a child before his world falls apart." Michael nodded, tears in his eyes. As I rode in the back of Morrison's car, not arrested, just transported, I looked out at the October afternoon, at the lake glittering in the distance, at the autumn leaves blazing red and gold. Harold had died here, or at least the lies had been born here. But today, the truth had finally won. The war wasn't over yet. There would be trials, legal battles, family trauma to navigate. But the most important battle had been won. I had survived. And in surviving, I had become something I'd never expected to be: dangerous. 3 months later, I stood in my kitchen on a cold January morning, watching snow fall across the fields Harold and I had worked together for 47 years. The farmhouse was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for years, perhaps not since before Rachel entered our lives. The trials had been swift, surprisingly so. Rachel and Tom's lawyers had advised them to take plea deals once they realized the evidence against them was overwhelming. Michael's recording from outside the cabin, my written testimony, the financial records of the fraudulent trust, the forged insurance documents, it all painted an undeniable picture. Rachel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and insurance fraud, 25 years to life. Tom pleaded guilty to accessory to murder, fraud, and conspiracy, 15 years. Both were already serving their sentences in separate facilities. Appeals denied. The life insurance money had been recovered and returned to Harold's estate, to me, as his legal widow. $500,000 I'd never wanted, bought with my husband's life. I'd put most of it in trust for Ethan's education, kept enough to maintain the farm, and ensure I wouldn't be a burden to Michael in my old age. The real victory, though, hadn't been in the courtrooms. It had been in the quiet moments after, watching my family slowly, painfully, begin to heal. I heard footsteps on the porch, the sound of stomping boots clearing snow. The door opened, and Ethan came in, his cheeks red from the cold, his eyes bright. "Grandma, you should see how deep the snow is by the barn. We could build a fort." "We could," I agreed, smiling at him. At 13, he was caught between childhood and adolescence, struggling with everything that had happened. The revelation about his mother, the divorce, the criminal trials, it had nearly broken him. But children were resilient, more so than adults gave them credit for. Michael followed his son inside, carrying groceries. He'd moved back to the farmhouse temporarily while he figured out his next steps. The house where he'd grown up had become his sanctuary again, and mine had become less lonely with them here. "Ethan, go change out of those wet clothes before you catch cold," Michael said, the automatic parental command that made me smile. He was a good father, better than he knew. After Ethan disappeared upstairs, Michael set the groceries on the counter and looked at me with an expression I'd come to recognize, the one that meant he needed to talk. "Mom, I got a call from Rachel's lawyer this morning." My hands stilled over the coffee I'd been pouring. "What did she want?" "Rachel wants to see Ethan. She's claiming she has rights as his mother, that keeping him from her is cruel and unusual punishment." The audacity of it took my breath away. After everything, the murder, the lies, the cold admission that Ethan had been nothing more than a tool, she wanted access to him. "What does Ethan want?" I asked, because that was what mattered. "He says he never wants to see her again. He's angry, hurt. He feels betrayed." Michael slumped into a chair. "But what if he changes his mind later? What if he resents me for keeping them apart?" I sat across from him, taking his hand. "Michael, you're his father. You make the decision that protects him now, today. If he changes his mind when he's older, when he's ready to face that relationship, then you'll support him. But right now, he's a child who just learned his mother is a murderer. He needs stability, safety, and time to heal." "The lawyer says Rachel is getting psychiatric help, that she's remorseful." "Rachel is a sociopath," I interrupted firmly. I sat across from her in that cabin, looked into her eyes. There was nothing there, Michael. No real emotion, no genuine remorse. Only calculation. Whatever she's telling her lawyers, whatever performance she's putting on for the parole board she'll eventually face. It's not real. Michael was quiet for a long moment. "How did you know? Before any of this came out? Did you ever suspect she wasn't who she seemed?" It was a question I'd asked myself repeatedly over the past months. Had there been signs? Had I missed warnings that could have prevented Harold's death? "I thought she was cold sometimes," I admitted. Too perfect, too controlled, but I attributed it to personality differences, to her being younger, more modern. I thought I was being judgmental, old-fashioned. I squeezed his hand. "We see what we expect to see, what we want to see. Rachel was good at being what people needed her to be. Dad saw someone who made him feel young," Michael said quietly. "I saw someone who completed my family. You saw someone taking care of your husband when you felt overwhelmed. And Ethan saw his mother. I added. That's the cruelest part. Children should be able to trust their parents absolutely. Rachel stole that from him. Upstairs, we could hear Ethan moving around, the creak of floorboards in what had been Michael's childhood bedroom. He's doing better, Michael said. The therapist says he's processing everything in a healthy way. But Mom, I'm so angry. At Rachel, at Tom, at Dad for starting this whole mess. Some days I can barely function. That's normal, I assured him. Anger is part of grief. You're mourning multiple losses. Your father, your marriage, your trust in people you loved. That takes time. How are you so calm about it? Dad cheated on you, lied to you for years. Doesn't that make you furious? Oh, it does, I said, and I felt the familiar burn of betrayal in my chest. I'm angry at Harold every single day. Angry at his weakness, his vanity, his willingness to destroy our family for an affair. But I'm also— I paused, searching for the right words. I'm also free. Free from the weight of a marriage built on lies. Free from wondering why he seemed distant. Why he'd stopped really seeing me. Now I know, and knowing hurts. But it's better than the uncertainty I lived with. Do you miss him? I miss who I thought he was, I admitted. I miss the man I married, the partner I believed I had. But that man may never have existed, not fully. The real Harold was someone who could be seduced, who could lie, who could betray the people who loved him most. I looked at my son. So no, I don't miss him. I mourn what I've lost, but I don't want it back. Michael nodded slowly. I feel the same about Rachel. The woman I married, if she ever existed. I loved her. But the woman who killed Dad, who used our son as leverage, who would have let you die? I don't know that person. I never did. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from shared trauma and deep understanding. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the farm in white, covering old scars with fresh possibility. Grandma, Dad, Ethan called from upstairs. Can we make hot chocolate and watch a movie? Absolutely, I called back, standing and moving to the stove. Come down and help me make it. As I heated milk and measured cocoa powder, Ethan chattering about school and his friends and the video game he wanted for his birthday, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, exactly. The wounds were too fresh for that, the losses too profound, but peace. The calm that comes from knowing the truth, from surviving the unsurvivable, from standing on solid ground after years of walking on lies. That evening, after the movie and dinner, after Ethan had gone to bed, and Michael had retreated to his old room to make phone calls to lawyers and therapists and the school counselor, I walked through the farmhouse alone. I touched the furniture Harold had built, looked at the photos on the walls, pictures from happier times, or at least times I'd believed were happy. I'd removed the photos of Rachel, but kept the ones with Ethan. He deserved to remember the good moments of his childhood, however complicated they'd become. In Harold's study, I found the box I'd been avoiding for months. His personal effects from the hospital, his wallet, his wedding ring. I opened it slowly, forcing myself to confront these last pieces of him. The wedding ring gleamed in the lamplight. Gold, simple, engraved with our wedding date. I'd chosen not to wear mine anymore, had locked it away in a drawer. His deserved the same fate. But underneath the ring, I found something unexpected. A letter, sealed, yellowed with age. My name on the envelope in Harold's handwriting. The real handwriting, messy and hurried, not the careful forgery Rachel had used. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Meggie, it read. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm a coward for not saying this to your face. I've done terrible things. I've betrayed you in ways I can't fully explain or excuse. I started something I couldn't stop, and it's poisoned everything good in my life. You deserved better than me. You deserved honesty, fidelity, respect. Instead, I gave you lies and took your trust for granted. I let vanity and weakness destroy the best thing I ever had. Your love. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that whatever happened, whatever you discover, you were never the problem. The problem was always me. my cowardice, my selfishness, my inability to appreciate what I had until it was too late. You are remarkable, Meggie. Stronger than I ever was, kinder than I deserved, wiser than I gave you credit for. I hope you find peace after I'm gone. I hope you find happiness. You've earned it 1,000 times over. I'm sorry. For everything. But mostly, I'm sorry I wasn't the man you believed I was. Harold. The letter blurred as tears filled my eyes. The first I'd cried for Harold since learning the truth. Not tears of grief for losing him, but tears for the waste of it all. The wasted years, the wasted love, the wasted potential of what we might have been if he'd been honest. If he'd been brave enough to face his problems instead of running to Rachel's arms. He'd known he was dying. The letter had been written weeks before his death, hidden away where I'd find it eventually. Had he suspected Rachel was poisoning him? Or had he simply known his heart was failing and wanted to confess before it was too late? I'd never know. And perhaps it didn't matter. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. It was closure of a sort, an acknowledgement from beyond the grave that I hadn't been crazy, hadn't been paranoid, hadn't been the cold, neglectful wife Rachel had painted me as. But it changed nothing about what had happened or what needed to happen next. I had a farm to run, a grandson to help raise, a son to support through divorce and trauma. I had a life to rebuild, not from the ashes of betrayal, but from the foundation of truth I'd fought so hard to uncover. That night, as I locked up the farmhouse and checked on Ethan one last time, sleeping peacefully, his face young and innocent in the moonlight, I made a decision. I would stay here, in this house, on this farm. I would not let Rachel and Tom drive me away from the home I'd built, the land I'd worked, the legacy I'd earned. They'd taken enough. They wouldn't take this. And I would use everything I'd learned about deception, about manipulation, about the darkness people could hide beneath pleasant surfaces, to make sure my family was never vulnerable like this again. I would teach Ethan to question, to verify, to trust his instincts. I would teach him that kindness shouldn't mean naivety, that trust should be earned, that family was defined by actions, not blood. I would be the grandmother he needed, strong, protective, unshakable. The woman who'd brought down murderers wouldn't let anything else harm her grandson. As I settled into bed that night, the farmhouse creaking around me in the winter wind, I thought about age and wisdom, about survival and strength. Rachel had called me an old woman as if it were an insult, as if age meant weakness. She'd learned, too late, that age meant experience. It meant patience, strategic thinking, the ability to see the long game while younger people chased immediate gratification. It meant knowing when to fight and when to wait, when to reveal your hand and when to play innocent, when to trust and when to verify everything. I was 70 years old. I'd survived betrayal, murder plots, and attempts to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. I'd brought down a killer using nothing but intelligence, persistence, and the element of surprise. I was old, but old meant dangerous in ways youth could never imagine, and I would never be underestimated again. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the farm in white, promising renewal. Spring would come eventually, as it always did. New growth would emerge from frozen ground. Life would continue, and I would be here, watching over my family, protecting what mattered, living with the truth rather than comfortable lies. The phone on my nightstand buzzed, a text from Michael downstairs. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for fighting for us, for being stronger than any of us knew. I love you." I smiled, typing back, "I love you too. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow we start rebuilding. Tomorrow and all the days after." Because that was what survivors did. We adapted, we overcame, we rebuilt from stronger foundations. The farmhouse settled into silence around me. Somewhere in the darkness, Harold's ghost might have lingered, but I no longer felt haunted. The truth had exorcised those demons. I was free. Wounded, yes. Changed, certainly, but free. And in that freedom, I found something unexpected. Not happiness yet, but the promise of it. The knowledge that I'd survived the worst and emerged not broken, but forged into something harder, more resilient. Age hadn't weakened me. It had been my greatest weapon, and if anyone else ever threatened my family, they'd learn what I'd learned in that terrible, transformative week. Never underestimate a 70-year-old woman with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. I closed my eyes, finally at peace, and slept without nightmares for the first time in months. The mystery was solved. The family was safe. Justice had been served. And Maggie Sullivan, grandmother, widow, survivor, had won. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.